Let's start by talking about Metro West. Can you describe your company's proposal for this project and what you're hoping to achieve with it if it goes forward?
So I guess the proposal with Metro West was really a consortium, not only our company. So we were part of the puzzle, part of the instigating group.
Sure.
And it was really about private enterprise funding a Metro West rail line from Sydney to Parramatta in a stage one. So major infrastructure funded privately through particular clusters and really building communities along its path in what is now unused or industrial land or key land areas to help Sydney's development.
So this is a rail link from kind of the western edge of Sydney to some of the western suburbs.
Yeah, so basically from the centre of Sydney to Parramatta, which is really the next CBD in the overall Sydney picture.
Sydney's got this interesting condition developing, which your project would take further, that has kind of multiple centers because the downtown is very developed. There's a lot of construction still, but it's very dense. There's other little dense areas too, and you're trying to link them up with this project. How do you see that playing out? Is that the goal, first of all, and is that something that you see as ultimately a good thing for a city to have these multiple dense areas?
So I guess it has a number of facets to it. So the proposal was about the link between two major cities, but two major CBDs, but really collecting land along its pathway, which was really underutilised, old industrial land and things like that. There's also another agenda here where the rail in another stage will be continued to our second airport. So we have a second airport planned in Sydney. Sydney only has the one airport. It's got curfews on it. There's all sorts of limitations for such a big city. So there are a number of reasons for it. But yeah, it's connecting the main areas of business. Parramatta, out west, is a really growing area, and it's connecting it all up, and people living in between and being able to commute easily.
So this is transit-oriented development that you're going for?
Yes, that's right, exactly.
How exactly do you promote transit-oriented development? What kind of policies are there in place from the public sector? And then on the private side, what do you do to make it more than just, developing next to a rail line? What makes it sort of something more than that? Yeah, so this area is predominantly driven by government. And government has many different models on delivering new railway lines. There's a lot of infrastructure happening in Sydney right now, the majority of which is government funded. So there's a rail line from the northwest going to Chatswood in the north, and in a couple of weeks, the next section of that's about to start from Chatswood going south. But they're all government funded. And the challenge is government doesn't have an endless supply of money to keep the infrastructure going. So it's about private enterprise. This was really about private enterprise being able to assist with some ideas to not burden the taxpayers' funds and to be able to keep infrastructure in front of development rather than the infrastructure trying to catch up with the development that's happening. One of the problems with transit-oriented development is you end up making the area more desirable. Land values go up. That's good for people that own the land. It allows developers to bring new things. That's good. But inevitably, you're going to have people being unable to live in that area anymore. They're priced out, or there's an affordability problem. How can cities manage that? How is Metro West, how is Sydney going to manage that?
Yeah, affordability is a big topic here in town at the moment, with Sydney being in the top 10 most expensive cities. But I think if we don't keep up supply and keep the projects going, then that'll just get worse, because there'll be less, it's all supply and demand. There'll be less apartments and more people wanting to live here, and then it'll be even another challenge. Projects like this and other developments are about giving people options on how they want to live. Sydney's growing, so we can keep expanding the urban sprawl, and some of that is happening, and there's lots of land out west. But projects like this were about having some areas of medium density along its route, so people can still reasonably afford in an area that's not too far away from where they work and so on, rather than being pushed very far away out west and spending all your life travelling.
So I guess you see that as those are kind of the two choices in the very large scale for a city that's like Sydney, developing, growing very fast. You either have a lot of dense, sort of medium density hubs,
Yep.
and then still probably one main downtown, but very dense and expensive, but relatively affordable. There should be some measures in place. How do you make sure that that's able to not just go out of control and doesn't just become just more and more just rich hubs, and then everyone else still lives really far away and commutes into one of those hubs?
Yeah, I know it's a challenge, and look, I don't think there's a magic answer to it, to be honest. But it's giving people variety and choice. So you'd like to live in a larger, more palatial residence, and you've only got certain funds. Well, maybe that's a little bit further out west. If you're happier to live in a a smaller sort of arrangement, then maybe you can afford a little bit closer to the city, and most people make those choices day by day. Look, I've grown up in Sydney and born here, and I remember when I first trip overseas, Sydney doesn't seem that long ago, was just suburbia houses and blocks of land, apartments. Yeah, there was some, but not really. And you'd go to Europe and it was all a bit of a shock. I guess Sydney's catching up to those places now.
Catching up, and in some ways, like you described, going further.
Yes, that's right.
What are some of the lessons that you think Sydney has for Europe or for other cities around the world?
Yeah, well, I guess it's, we have the beauty of being a younger city and being able to learn the good and the challenging bits from other places. But each city is different and they're all unique as well. But it's really about making sure people have options, making sure the supply is there, making sure people have choices. And it's about trying to have these building communities. So in other words, in the one area you live, you can work, your hospital's nearby, your school's nearby, rather than and making sure there's all the clusters of those, so that you can still travel between those, but there's a lot more at your doorstep, shall we say.
Let's get back to transitory and development for a second. How do you best mitigate the construction noise and all that hassle that comes from a large new infrastructure project like Metro West disrupting life in and around that area?
I guess I'm in the construction game, and the reality is that the mess, the noise, the dust is just part of life. However, I think as the construction industry has evolved, we have got a lot better at it. A lot of new equipment is a lot quieter than it used to be. There's a lot more measures on controlling disruptions. Can it be zero? Probably unlikely. But I think there's a couple of things that happen here, is that we want to make sure the public know what's happening. So part of it is just letting them know what's going on, informing them, and sometimes they can even have input, such that the local community at least knows what's going on. The worst thing is driving down the road and then realising the road's been shut down for the week, things like that. So that goes part way. And it's also explaining to people the medium, long-term sort of benefits that will come. Sometimes it'll short-term pain for a long-term gain. I picture it like, we've all done our home renovations. You redo your kitchen and redo your bathroom, and at first the house is a mess. But you put up with it, and then once it's finished, you enjoy it for many, many years. And that's the parallel here. Are
people receptive to that message when you tell them, I know this is a headache now, but it's going to be better in the future? How do they react?
Look, the more we inform people, the better off they are. Does it solve it all? And do some people, it still affects people? Then I wouldn't say everyone would be receptive, but the more we explain and help people understand, the better off they are. And look, there are some extreme cases where you really affect some small businesses. Part of the initial planning is that you may need to recompense these people. The short term shouldn't send businesses broke or things like that. So there may be, it's all got to be fair and reasonable, I guess, is a real goal here.
Sometimes just consultation and education and these things are not enough. You need to actually pay people for their inconvenience.
The small business that is going broke because there's all this activity for 12 months outside their front door, something may need to be done. And that should be all part of the project planning funded for and all those sorts of things.
Are there any policies that you think best encourage transit-oriented development?
Look, to me, it's the private enterprise influence, I think, is something that should be encouraged more and more, because governments are restricted in their funding, and hence the private enterprise can help get infrastructure ahead of development rather than development ahead of infrastructure.
How so? How do private enterprise, how do you get private companies interested in and involved with that kind of development?
So I guess in the case of Metro West, it was really about pockets of land which would increase in value due to the rail network, because rather than being a low density area, it will all of a sudden become, say, a medium density area. So the developers would be able to participate in that, but also part of that gain would be refunded to government to be able to fund the project. So it's really about, developers develop, that's their business. So it's about sharing the benefits and all that, rather than the government funding a railway line and the people along there getting the benefits anyhow and not having to really contribute to it. Whereas this is a clever way where private enterprise are actually happy to contribute, and it's all laid out before them in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. How do you make sure that the community is sharing in the benefits of the project?
Yeah, well, like building communities is so interactive. So the community is about the hospitals, it's about schools, it's about all those factors. And I think in that planning, there are the various government departments that take care of education, take care of health. They have to be on this planning journey together. So as we plan this local suburb, this new community, it's consultation with the health people on what the requirements are in that local area, with the education to make sure the new schools for all the new people coming in the area. So it's very connected, and we all need to work together as a team to get the best solution.